Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. We continue Movie Adaptation Month with something that's gone through several adaptations to get to this point. Street Fighter, the comic of the movie of the game. You may have noticed that the last time I talked about anything Street Fighter related was back in 2011 when I reviewed the first issue of Malibu's infamously bad Street Fighter comic. That I didn't think was the worst thing in the world, mainly because I'm not a Street Fighter fan, and thus half the stuff people were complaining to me about went over my head. Well, that and my pronunciation of certain names, that I usually never have to say. Well, that and people being shocked that there was a Mortal Kombat advertisement on the back of a Street Fighter comic! People do realize that advertisements are usually bought in bulk for a month's worth of books at a company and are not tailored specifically per comic except for, like, age appropriateness, right? Because the truth is, there is audience overlap with most of these kinds of products. Of course there's gonna sometimes be promotion for the competition. This happens all the time with Marvel and DC, though usually more for movies than the actual comics themselves. In any case, let's talk about Street Fighter the movie. Or just Street Fighter, but it's easier to distinguish it as the movie. It is a stupid film, and I absolutely love it. It's very much the same way I enjoy the Fast and the Furious movies. They may not be the smartest movies out there, but they make up for it with memorable characters, very quotable lines, and just a sense of fun that permeates the entire thing. This is aided, of course, by the incomparable Raul Julia, who took on the role for the sake of his children, who were fans of the video games, and he thought they'd enjoy watching him get to hit Jean-Claude Van Damme. And being the professional damn badass that he was, he apparently did heavy research on dictators to mimic their mannerisms, and insisted on doing his own stunts. This was while he was dying from cancer, by the way. The man knew it and decided to have a fun time for the sake of his kids, and it's apparent on the screen, because this performance is beautiful and almost everything he says is quotable. He's very much like Khan from Star Trek II, a villain you love to hate and yet want to see more of. I mean, there's a reason I fought 2 people in my life who like to quote the character. I can't speak to the accuracy to the games, and I know that's a sticking point for some people, but for me it transcends the need to reference a tournament fight or anything like that. It's just something you invite your friends over and watch for the fun of it. What remains to be seen, however, is if a comic adaptation can carry over that sense of fun. So let's dig into Street Fighter, the official comic adaptation, and see if it can.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he's a man, punch, wears a birdie hat. Linkara, he has a magic gun. Where'd he purchase that? Linkara, coins, robots, Amazon and trucks. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara.
Few things to get out of the way before we actually start talking about it. One, much like the movie, the name is a little trickier. The cover of the comic just has it as Street Fighter, but that doesn't make sense to just call it that. So I labeled it as the official comic adaptation, thanks to the text in the corner, plus all those other movie adaptations that have it up there. But the copyright information actually lists the title as Street Fighter, The Battle for Shadaloo. Not sure if at some point that's what the movie was gonna be called, but it's just weird. 2, this is actually a rare instance where I have a polybagged comic. I think the last one of those was back when I did X-Force #1 in 2011. As a reminder, a polybag is a plastic bag that's used for comic storage, but sometimes, especially in the 90s, polybagged comics would be sold with the book, usually to keep some special item inside of it specifically for collectors, a method of jacking up the price and making it seem like it was more valuable. While this one does not have a collector's item listed anywhere on it, it does come with free Street Fighter rub-on tattoos and a trading card. I don't know if the tattoos still work after all this time, but I am disappointed by the trading card. As a reminder, it's only worth something if it's got Mr. T on it. Anyway, let's talk about the cover, which is... yeesh. They're definitely trying for that movie poster aesthetic and failing miserably due to a lack of content. Raul Julia's M. Bison takes up most of it and looks pretty good, but then the rest of it is just... wow. Let's start with Blanca up there, who's staring into your soul while his hair, I guess, is just kind of a glowing solid mass. Then there's Guile, who looks like they took some bored college bro and photoshopped his head into Jean-Claude Van Damme's body. It's really the expression that sells it, though.
Dull surprise!
And speaking of video game to movie adaptations, check out Chun-Li down here in her gotta go fast pose. We open with Chun-Li, a reporter in the movie, giving exposition. The Allied nations have secured a port in the country of Shadaloo, which has been taken over by M. Bison. It's been only 24 hours since the dangerously unpredictable warlord General M. Bison seized 63 AN relief workers from a village north of here. The self-styled general's ransom demand? An astonishing $20 billion. Which is absurd, of course. The going rate for relief workers is $20,000 per head. Despite having only a small force, Bison makes up for it with high-tech weaponry that puts him on par with the rest of the world. Inside of Bison's hideout, he snaps the necks of several Allied nations' army men. Or, rather in this panel, he seems to be snapping their necks Bane-style, given how this guy is going over his knee there. And the foreshortening on the dead man's legs is a bit, well... I'm just saying it's possible that in reality, Bison is actually 20 feet tall given this art. Chun-Li tries to interview Colonel Guile, the man in charge of the Allied nations' efforts, but he only wants to make a statement to Bison, which gets his attention, due to him being disappointed by how the regular soldiers are so easy to kill. Bison overrides the broadcast signal and contacts Guile directly, something Guile wanted so they could trace it back to his base. "Why do you address a fellow warrior with such disrespect?" "Warrior? You? I've known tapeworms with more honor than you." "Admittedly, you've got them beaten on fashion sense, though." Bison says they have 3 days to give him the ransom money before he executes the hostages, which makes Guile really need to overshade himself and grit his teeth in 90s rage. Upon learning that they're trying to trace his signal, Bison shuts off the call and realizes, based on their talk, that the last hostage, named Carlos Blanca, was a friend of Guile's and decides to send him off for experimentation. Guile's second-in-command, Cammy, was unsuccessful in getting a trace on the transmission. "The city is under curfew, Miss Zhang. Press passes are invalid after dark. You better get moving." "You can't do that." "I have my own army. I could do whatever I like." So nice that he's our hero. He really distinguishes himself from Bison by restricting freedom of the press, imposing curfew, and threatening people with his troops. That night, we meet Ken and Ryu, and yes, I know it's supposed to be Ryu, but the movie pronounces it Ryu, and I'm gonna be faithful to that version of it. Anyway, they've come to meet with a gunrunner named Sagat, wanting to sell weapons to him. They agree on the payment, and the two want to walk away with the money safely before telling where the guns are stored, which in this panel seems to make Ryu very pissed off, but Sagat says he already had them followed and took the guns and brought them there, having his men aim said guns at them. "What's wrong? Surely you're not afraid of your own weapons? As everyone knows, guns are incapable of killing the people that they belong to." Man, Ryu held that angry look for so long that now his face is melting. But no, the bigger issue is that it turns out the guns are fakes. Toys that shoot ping pong balls. Sagat, where's your sense of humor? Look, keep the money and toys. Maybe you guys have kids. We've got a connection for video games. Well, okay, but only if you have Tekken. Crap. I like my games live, and in living color. No, Sagat. Jim Carrey was last week's episode. Make that dying color, which is kind of an orangish burgundy thing. It's kind of hard to describe. After the two fail to make an escape, they're brought down into a live cage match with tons of people watching and betting. Sagat's champion is Vega, armed with distinctly more Wolverine-esque claws than I recall him having before. Sagat says that Ryu will go up first, which is why it's weird that in this panel, Ryu is implying that Ken is the one going up. Then again, maybe he's just confused because now his face looks like a lumpy potato. Have I mentioned yet that the artwork is really bad? Because it's really bad. This is further demonstrated by the arrival of Guile in a tank, since he's now suffering from advanced stages of Youngblood's disease, his eyes forming into black holes where no light can escape. He places everyone in the cage match under arrest because... I don't know, stopping illegal cage matches is his priority when going after Bison. But hey, at least he's gonna be able to draw a sweet hand turkey with the way he spread out his fingers in this panel. While Ken and Ryu realize that they still have to deal with Sagat and his goons in a prison camp, Guile meets with his people about how they still can't find Bison's compound. The meeting is briefly interrupted by an attempted assassination on Guile's life, and I would point out how transparently evil the assassin is drawn in this panel, but then again, everyone in this comic is scowling and pissed off, so it probably looks normal to them. The assassin has a tattoo marking him as a member of Sagat's gang, and this allows them to come up with a plan. Plant someone in Sagat's group, let him escape, and follow him to Bison, since Sagat supplies Bison with weapons. Hopefully, it'll be someone without as scrunchy a face as this. Ken and Ryu get into a fight with Vega and some goons, and Vega even has a new claw glove. Where the hell did he get that? But yeah, that gives Guile the idea of using the two of them. If Sagat won't trust any new friends, maybe he'll trust some new enemies.
There is logic in what he says.
We get a scene that wasn't in the movie where Chun-Li and her assistants, Balrog and E. Honda, interrogate a guy for information on the location of the Thieves Market, which moves locations every week. It was cut for a good reason, since it's not really necessary for the plot or to fill in a plot hole. Chun-Li just uses a tracking device to find its location in the film. All it does is establish that her compatriots can kick ass. Meanwhile, Ken and Ryu are given the sales pitch by Guile, who convinces them to join forces with him, especially in light of all the suffering the people of Shadaloo have had to endure, not only under Bison, but any 2-bit warlord in the region. You two justify your little con games by saying you steal from criminals, but the criminals you rob prey on these people. Where does that put you on the food chain? Wait, so we rob from criminals, but they rob from the poor, but we're just as bad as them. I'm confused. Are you saying we should be robbing from the poor? Back at Bison's headquarters, he checks in on Dalsim, a kidnapped scientist. Dr. Dalsim, how goes your research? The same. Corrupted, warped, my science twisted to serve perversion instead of peace. That's what I have written on all my business cards. I don't know what he's complaining about. Well, after I crush my enemies, we'll see about getting you published. That should cheer you up. See, M. Bison cares about the welfare of his employees. Dalsim's task is to basically turn Blanca into the Incredible Hulk, pumping his body full of weird chemicals and mutagens while reconditioning him to be uber-violent with continual images of war, violence, and hatred. But why does he find this educational software so disturbing? Because unlike you, he's not psychotic. And Bison hits him. You fool! Psychotic refers to those dealing with a psychosis and could refer to those with mental health issues. You meant to say psychopath, as in someone who isn't able to feel empathy and is generally a better descriptor for me. What kind of a doctor are you? Bison's bodyguard, Zangief, wonders why he allows Dalsim to get away with calling him evil names. Zangief, you must sympathize with Dalsim. He just doesn't understand that I am the only one who can save the world from AN tyranny. Poor man. Someday he know truth like me. We can only pray. I punched him and keep him in chains and force a prisoner to be experimented on because I'm a good guy. Back at the prison, Ryu, Ken, Vega, and Sagat are about to be shipped out with some other prisoners, but Ryu and Ken manage to get hold of the keys to their shackles. Sagat convinces them to let them escape too, to help them get out of the city. During the escape, Ken also shoots Guile, seemingly killing him, which I have a hard time believing happened because I'm pretty sure Ken's eyes are closed with how hard he's squinting. And despite that earlier scene about the Thieves Market, we still have Chun-Li planting her wireless mic on the truck to try to track the escaping prisoners to it. She later reports on Guile's death, much to Bison's disappointment. A pity. I was hoping to face him on the battlefield, one gentleman warrior to another. Then I would snap his spine. Ah, the road not taken. See, I made the Bane comparison earlier, but now I really do want Bison to break Guile and be all like, only then do I give you permission to die, Colonel! Our intrepid reporter pals realize there's a second homing signal on the truck, aimed directly at the Allied nation's headquarters. So Chun-Li decides to break in and figure out what's up. Naturally, she has brought her ninja gear. She goes to the morgue to avoid personnel, and finds a very much alive Guile laying on a gurney. Not sure why he felt the need to take a nap under a sheet for his fake death, but whatever. He tries to take Chun-Li into custody, though she explains that she's not just here as a reporter. She's been after Bison for 20 years. Guile is not convinced. I should have known you wouldn't understand. I understand better than you know, but this war isn't about your personal vendetta. It's about mine. Only I am allowed to have vengeance today. Screw you, lady. She manages to escape and quickly makes her way to the thieves' market with Honda and Balrog disguised as entertainers. Ken worries that they're gonna get killed by somebody's lowlifes, a comment overheard by Zangief. Did you say General Bison was lowlife? Lowlife? No, I said what a great life it was working for him. You have served with General Bison? Zangief not know you, and Zangief head of Human Resources Department. Would look bad if not know you. Ryu furthers the ruse. Like this guy wouldn't remember that night in Shadaloo City. He wasn't satisfied with 2 women he already had. No, he had to steal ours too. Zangief have 4 women? Well, not really. You passed out and they just had each other instead. Little buddies! I love that that worked. Anyway, with him pacified, we get some minor cut dialogue that hints at the more supernatural powers of the games, deliberately cut by the screenwriter to help keep things grounded, but was open to having it in a sequel. You know, Ken, you've forgotten everything our sensei talked about. Trust. Honor. Our sensei also talked about the dragon punch, where a fighter's inner spirit gets released. Yeah, the Shoryuken. So I think dragons and honor have a lot in common. They're both imaginary. Now, if our sensei had mentioned some kind of Hadouken, that would be different. Ken and Ryu are pulled away by Chun-Li, and we learn Honda and Balrog's backstories. A sumo wrestler and boxer, respectively, whose reputations were ruined by Shadaloo criminals. They fail to mention that their eyesight was also ruined by them, when they were given blank, pure white spaces where their eyes should be. Chun-Li, having figured out that they work for Guile, warns them that this whole area is going to be blown sky high and lets them go. However, Guile's forces are already nearby as part of their tracking, and Cammy goes in to try to bring Chun-Li back into custody. However, the powder keg that is this entire situation gets even worse when Bison tries to pay Sagat for his latest shipment with money that has his face printed on it. Your money isn't worth the paper it's printed on! On the contrary, Sagat, the Bank of England will make every Bison dollar worth 5 British pounds, once I've kidnapped their queen, of course. I mean, obviously, he paid for previous shipments of weapons with actual cash, so I guess a credit line could be established. He calls Bison a lunatic, which leads to the two forces aiming guns at each other, with Ken and Ryu between them. To keep their cover, and themselves alive, Ken and Ryu decide to redirect their anger towards someone else. And they do this by punching Bison and Sagat. This really should just get them killed on the spot, but instead they point out the fleeing reporters. Chun-Li announces via broadcast that they're about to be blown up thanks to a truck full of explosives coming right their way. And unfortunately, the best joke in the movie is not done properly in the comic.
Quick! Change the channel!
No, instead it's just, what do we do? Change the channel? And the scene that was on the TV was like 2 panels ago, so it's just not funny anymore. Especially when he's more confused by what's going on than establishing he's an idiot. But yeah, thanks to Ken and Ryu's warning, the group were able to escape the explosion. And what's worse, the reporters are captured and Sagat officially joins his forces to Bison's, doubling the size of his army. So Ken and Ryu almost got themselves killed and ended up making the whole situation a lot worse. And Chun-Li's warning to the two got her captured and her murder mission a failure. So all around, the message is never help anyone. Still, Guile is able to find the location of Bison's base. It's impenetrable by air, but a small amphibious force could get in under his radar net. At the headquarters, Bison shows off the technology at his disposal. At my command, the combined technologies of East and West. While their governments scorn me, their corporations adored me. Behold, my doomsday complex, sponsored by Mountain Dew. Honda and Balrog get sent off to be tortured while Chun-Li is sent to Bison's private chambers because he's the villain. There's a weird comic relief non-subplot introduced here. I call it a non-subplot because it really affects nothing other than give a chance for Guile to scoff at authority. The Undersecretary General of the Allied Nations arrives and tells Guile he's relieved of command since the Security Council has elected to just pay the ransom demand. Guile, of course, points out how stupid that is, especially since in a month he can just take hostages again and demand more money, but he's not listening, thus leading to Guile's heroic speech. "Troopers, I've been handed new orders. Our government says the war is cancelled. We can all go home. Meanwhile, Bison gets rewarded for his crimes, and our friends and comrades who have already died here will have done so for nothing. But we can all go home. Meanwhile, the ideals that brought us here, like peace, justice, and freedom, get packed up along with our tents and blankets. But we can all go home. Well, I'm not going home. I'm gonna kick Bison's ass so hard that the next Bison wannabe is gonna feel it. Now who wants to go home? And who wants to go with me?" Inside his grave, General George S. Patton's skeleton is saluting. Gotta love those ideals of peace, love, and freedom, Guile. Which is why you imposed martial law, a curfew, and restricted reporters. Anyway, Chun-Li is brought to Bison's quarters and apparently forced into a stereotypical Chinese dress. Don't know why they decided to put her in the red one. She's only in it so she can resemble her game outfit, but at this point, just go for the blue. Anyway, she explains her backstory, that when Bison was first starting out his campaign 20 years ago, her father led an uprising in their village that forced Bison's attack away, but her father was murdered by him as he retreated. "Sorry, I don't remember any of it." "You don't remember?" "For you, the day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. For me, it was Tuesday. For Zangief, it was his first vacation in years." Ken and Ryu break Honda and Balrog out of their cells, though they seem to be doing fine on their own, and Chun-Li reveals that she's been spending the last decade training in martial arts in the hope she could be where she is now, ready to kick Bison's ass. "I don't think so. I have spies everywhere, and no one has ever seen you in combat. Why, since you entered this country, you haven't thrown a single punch. I know women, my dear. And you are harmless." Ugh, not harmless to the audience, though. What the hell is going on with Chun-Li's face? But of course, that's what she wanted him to think, easily snapping off her handcuffs and attacking him. Before she can deal with him, the rest of our heroes storm in. Ken says she can't kill him because they need Bison alive to order the hostages released, which is stupid since it's not like Bison would ever do so. However, this momentary distraction allows Bison, or whoever has taken his place, because yeah, the artwork has suddenly devolved for him when he was the most consistently drawn throughout, to slip into a safe room and release knockout gas. Must be awkward whenever he trips and accidentally activates that. While Dhalsim changes Blanca's programming to messages of peace when the guard's back is turned, Bison berates his prisoners on failing to kill him. "Simpletons! Had you worked together instead of against each other, you might have stopped me!" So basically the lesson here is that fighting games are bullcrap because you're all working against each other. Guile's stealth boat is detected and Bison demands he identify himself. "This is the collection agency, Bison. Your ass is 6 months overdue, and now it's mine." So Guile's personal vendetta was about him being a repo man? And thus a meme from another critic is born. Guile? Alive?
Of course!
It is funny that even I still use that clip. I think it shows the staying power of this movie and Julia's performance. 2 words said in an over-the-top fashion, and not even used in the original review as anything but a filler clip for the style utilized at the time. The movie is so hammy and over-the-top, and I love it. It is such an enjoyable little piece of fluff. And this comic ruins it by having everyone talking through gritted teeth and looking like the most miserable, generic assholes. Anyway, Guile's forces abandon the boat as Bison blows it up. Game over! Unfortunately for Bison, Guile inserted another quarter. Dhalsim's guard finally notices what he's been up to and attacks him, but in the struggle, Blanca is set free to attack him. As Guile's forces arrive at the compound, the 3-day deadline expires and they haven't been paid. Considering they were apparently planning on negotiating, you'd think they'd have, I don't know, contacted him Or given him the money? Guile sneaks in and reaches Dhalsim's labs, running right into Blanca. Blanca's in bad shape and asks Guile for his help, who prepares to shoot him to try to spare him his condition, but Dhalsim arrives to stop that. Though his childlike mind retains the capacity for good and evil, he has difficulty understanding the difference. We will call him Neutro. Guile summons his troops to attack while he goes after Bison directly. Guile? How? I destroyed you! I saw it on TV! Maybe you should switch to cable. But I've got satellite! Our captured heroes work to escape while Guile tries to keep the hostages safe by side-limboing in this panel. Ken, Ryu, and Chun-Li are sent below to try to get the hostages free, pursued by Sagat and Vega. Guile, in the meantime, apparently got his hands on some guns, and it just looks so utterly ridiculous, but not in the good kind of way. Bison wants to know what happened to Blanca. Blanca was designed to be perfect, as powerful as an elephant, and as stupid and gullible as Zangief. Zangief overhears this. Wait a second, do you mean the guy who had a big skull on his logo might actually be a bad guy? I'm a bit confused about calling him gullible. Bison didn't really see himself as a villain in the movie, so why would he think that Zangief was gullible when he just believed in the cause? Ryu and Ken make their way down, but Ken decides he wants to just bail out at this point. Probably has something to do with him suddenly inflating like this. Ken equally becomes beefy, but yeah, Ken doesn't care about all the lives, he's just worried about getting out while he can. Ryu, however, wants to go help people, and the two separate. Guile reunites with his forces, who inform him that they can't find Bison. He's probably hiding! Hiding? What do I have to fear from you? Worker ants, carrying pitiful weapons, afraid of the purity of unarmed combat. I mean, if they are just worker ants, they kinda need the weapons to even the playing field. Bison emerges, and Guile orders his troops to get the hostages out. You've made me a happy man. Now, I'll make you a dead one. I spent like 3 hours trying to think of a funny quip to follow that up with, but honestly, that is just too good a one-liner. God bless this movie. As the fight continues, and Guile's face continues to get misshapen, Zangief reconsiders everything he thought he knew. It's no use. Zangief not want to fight. General call him stupid and whatever. Perhaps I have been wrong.
And I say, Zangief, you are bad guy. But this does not mean you're bad guy.
Ken tries to steal a golden statue on his way out, but then sees Ryu getting stalked by Vega and Sagat on a security monitor. Back with Guile and Bison, Guile thinks he's finally killed him, but then Bison rises up. In the movie, he shoots electricity out of his hands, but here he just punches Guile, meaning the next line makes no sense. What about purity of unarmed combat? Surely you've heard how superconductor magnetism levitates bullet trains from Tokyo to Osaka. It also levitates my desk, and now it levitates me. Side note, all the hard drives in this room have now been wiped. You came here to fight a madman, Colonel! Instead you found a god! Well, that's no good, Bison. Separation of church and state means now you have to take your face off of your own money. But yeah, Ken goes to help Ryu in the fight, allowing him to take on Sagat while Ryu deals with Vega. Handsome fighters never lose. Well, considering how bad everyone looks in this comic, I then expect everybody to lose. Sagat tries to shoot Ken from behind, but Ryu spots this and shoryukens him. Well, he pronounces it Shoryuken, which makes me wonder if that was always intentional that Ryu and Ken's names were in it. Anyway, back to Guile versus Bison. Still refuse to accept my godhood, Guile? Then it might be a good time to pray to your own god. Actually, Bison, I'm a Buddhist. Instead of in the movie, where Guile kicks Bison into his huge stack of monitors, Bison just shoots a bunch of C4 like an idiot and blows everything up. And so our heroes make their escape, managing to free the hostages. Guile tries to get Dhalsim and Blanca to go with him, Dhalsim for no reason deciding to adorn himself with skulls and a loincloth, but the two feel like they can't rejoin society in their current state. Sagat joins DJ, a character who has barely had a presence in the comic up until now, as they flee the building with a stolen chest full of money. Sagat, now with a scar on his chest, to try to tie this into the storyline of the games. Everyone makes it out, especially with the help of Zangief, as the headquarters continue to blow the hell up. Sagat and DJ discover the chest is full of bison dollars. Ken and Ryu decide to stick around to try to help rebuild Shadaloo, while also having me realize their outfits are more like space-age designs as opposed to their karate gis. And so our comic ends with some sequel baiting, as Bison manages to rise from the rubble once more. That actually happened in the movie too, in a post-credit scene. But sadly, the Street Fighter cinematic universe did not come to pass. This comic sucks, but not because of the writing. Honestly, as an adaptation, it's pretty damn good. A lot of movie adaptations I've covered before have a hard time fitting the whole thing even in 60 pages, but this thing pulls it off. There's not a lot that's been cut, and none of it that necessary. Some of the lines have been changed here or there, making them a bit weaker than their movie version, but honestly, it's a pretty direct translation. The fights are still pretty good, and stuff like Zangief has been expanded to give us more character for him before his turn to good at the end. It's still a so bad it's good kind of script, but that's very enjoyable. No, the problem here is the artwork. Wow, this thing is dreary and 90s as all get out. It takes away from the fun immensely just because it's too busy wallowing in the grim and gritty era, when Street Fighter, the movie and the games, is decidedly nothing like that. The movie is colorful and bright and almost self-aware with how goofy it is. In this, the character models are all over the place, especially for poor Ken and Ryu, with their silly putty faces constantly remolding themselves. Bison makes off the best in it, but only because I suspect they wanted to do right by the likeness rights of Raul Julia, while no one else cared as much for the rest. If this didn't have the Street Fighter stuff associated with it, you'd think it was just a run-of-the-mill early Image comic. Next time, we move from so bad it's good to just so bad it's bad, with the comic adaptation of the Halle Berry Catwoman movie.
If you know this, then why do you serve him?
Because he paid me a freaking fortune, you moron.
You got paid?